Today's presentation will be a Q&A discussion between Michael Smith, Senior MOM Consultant at ATS Global, and Evan Sloss, Director of MEA at iBaseT. Okay, let's get to our first question. So implementing an MES is really much more than just an IT project. It often requires changing how processes get done. And that means a cultural change is part of the process. And this is where it can get a little sticky. It's when we involve us humans in something like this. So let's talk about some of the suggestions on how to best manage this challenge. Michael, you want to start?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. I think cultural change is probably the biggest challenge that we face when implementing an MES system. And I think two great ways of kind of combating that is the first one is to deploy a system that makes everyone's life easier. So deploying that on technology that people are already familiar with, so mobile phones or tablets, something that people already know how to use and are happy to interact with in a user-friendly interface that doesn't add extra clicks and extra burden onto someone's existing day job, but just really eases capturing that data and running through those processes, provides them the information that they need to make their life easier. And I think the other kind of big hitter is to show people the benefits of it. So if you can start showing dashboards and metrics and ways of showing and explaining people how this system is actually improving your manufacturing processes and delivering value and improving their workplace and their day-to-day lives, then people really buy into that process much easier and start to embrace the systems I've seen.
Sounds good. Evan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say that it's a business transformation, and the business is more than just the software. It's people, it's process, but it's people that drive that. And like Michael said, you have to take them with you on this journey. And so when you're using an MES, for example, that's not heavily configured, it's more intuitive, people will work with that. And you know, the thing that we're seeing now, and I do hear from executives especially in aerospace and defense manufacturing companies, is that they're having a hard time kind of really recruiting and keeping people, because the people coming out of university, internships and apprenticeships, you know, they want to work with the best, not just the best software and tools, but also the best processes. And so while those internships and apprenticeships are heavily sought after, afterwards they have a retention problem, because those people want to go to Formula One companies. They want to go to the likes of SpaceX, people that are not just challenging with the products that they design and build, but also with the way that they design and build them, the technology they use, the processes they use. So you have to strike that balance.
All right. Well, thank you for bringing that perspective in there too. So, certainly. Okay, let's go into the next question here. Let's talk about budget resources. Sometimes that can be one of the bigger constraints, or have enough to get started but not enough to keep going, and then that can cause delays. So Evan, you want to continue with that on, you know, talking through, you know, how to potentially help break through that bottleneck?
Well, my view is that, and I guess you would say, of course I'm going to say this, but that is to focus on MES first. And it does not mean that you don't put the value into, let's say, PLM or ERP, because those are very important enterprise solutions. But what I'm seeing is that both ERP and PLM are bleeding into what should be the MES space. And what happens is that doesn't align with industry best practice, and ultimately creates unnecessary technical debt because you're having to customize around that. So, so I would say, you know, with MES First, you give ERP, it creates a hard stop for ERP and for PLM, and therefore allows for much better integration and a much more solid digital twin.
Michael, you want to give a counter argument to that?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. One of the key things to do on any implementation is to define a clear boundary architecture to define what each of those systems does functionally, what their capabilities are, and to really kind of stick to the core capabilities of those products within those boundaries and clearly define those interfaces. But I think the counter argument to that is so those enterprise systems, the ERP and PLM, often feed into the MES system. So yeah, how can you go MES first when you haven't spent the time with these pieces, with these systems, and maturing that data that feeds it?
Yeah, yeah. And just summarizing and observing and drawing conclusions from what you're saying. So I've heard that by defining the line within MES first, this is a less costly approach than trying to define it with ERP, given those sort of deployments can take further. Is any comment on that, or validation or observations that either of you have seen?
Yeah, I think that's a good approach, and I think the most important step in implementation is to get going and to move that implementation forward. And I think in terms of kind of the ERP and PLM, getting all of that data mature first, I think don't treat it as a big bang implementation, but treat it as a journey and a roadmap, and define how you're going to mature that data as you go along through the different phases of the project. Start from where you are and have an idea of where you want to get to, but don't stop yourself from starting by trying to get everything ticked off and completed before you start.
Yeah. All right, let's continue here. So often an MES project is looked, well, we've kind of covered some of this. An IT project, an MES project is often looked at as an IT project instead of business transformation, and what can be done to help overcome this. Evan did talk a little bit about this earlier. Michael, anything you'd like to add on this concept?
Yeah, I think it is much more than just an IT project. And I think that the key thing is to get that business engagement, to get manufacturing or operations involved from the beginning of the process, because they're the people that are going to be using the system. This is where it's going to add value. So engaging everyone along the way, and just understanding that it doesn't operate in the same way as a lot of IT systems, in that if the system goes down, then you're not making money anymore, you're not getting products out the door, you're not building anything. So not only looking into the kind of technologies and capabilities you're deploying, but also the resilience of that system and how you'd support it going forward.
Mm-hmm. Let's touch a little about the concerns that you just mentioned there on the potential of systems not being available, especially for, say, if someone's coming from a paper environment or a Microsoft Excel has served them well. Sometimes we hear some concerns about that. What if we lose connectivity? Does that mean the system will shut down? Evan, you want to cover and talk a little bit about that concern?
Well, some modern MES systems have offline capabilities. We certainly do. And you know, that is to overcome those kind of situations, but also if you look at manufacturing a ship or a submarine, if you're in the hull of a ship that's being manufactured or inside the submarine, you're effectively inside a Faraday cage. So you're going to lose connection anyway. So to be able to continue to do your work in those kind of situations is mission critical. So we spoke in the first webinar about selecting the right MES. So if you have an MES that doesn't have that capability, and then you really need to think about what's important. And this to me is a mission critical problem that needs to be overcome, and we do that.
That's a good point. Thank you for that. All right, let's go into our next question. Continuing along with the integration challenge that we had talked about before, let's talk about the data that's being collected and how that can be best distributed across the company, and how that may play a role in potentially making it a challenge to get your MES implemented on time and on budget. Evan, you want us to talk with that one?
Well, data is new oil, so it's the most important thing. So when we're looking at digital twin, it's not about MES or ERP or PLM. It's about data, but not just the data. It's got to be reliable, solid data that allows you to take the correct business decisions, so that you continue to manufacture quality products and you satisfy your customers, because that is why you're buying these things, not to make software companies rich or IT companies rich. It's to satisfy the requirements of your customers.
And maybe Michael, you wouldn't mind sharing some perspectives from some of the implementations that ATS Global's worked on this data side, and some of the challenges maybe you've seen and how to overcome them with this data sharing.
Sure, yeah. So I think a lot of the time people start off not quite knowing what data that they want. So whether that's from shop floor machines, I guess it's generally with shop floor machines and processes actually that people kind of like, well, I don't know what I want, so I'm going to capture all the data and I'll figure out what to do with it later. So I would advise to kind of capture the data that you need and you want, and you understand what you're going to do with that data to begin with, so that you're collecting it for a purpose. You're not just clogging up your systems with all of this information that you're capturing that you may one day find a use for. I think just get started, start building those interfaces in, start capturing that data, and start cleansing that data and understanding what you're doing with it, why you're collecting it, and deriving value from it. I think if you're not getting value from that data, if it's not serving a purpose, then you don't need to be collecting it. But I think it's the same. It's getting started and define the roadmap. So start integrating things a step at a time, linking in your other systems, and gradually as you go through the process, enriching those interfaces, collecting more data, sharing more information, and linking more systems together.
Excellent. Sounds like planning is the key here, and understanding, how to scope the project, how to do something that can be done within a reasonable amount of time before actually doing the implementation or as part of that. So thank you for that. All right, well, that brings us to how quickly 15 minutes can pass. So I hope everybody enjoyed that, and be sure to stay tuned for our next one and registered for when we take a look at, once your deployment is live, what are some of the success metrics that you should be considering as part of evaluating that investment. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for your time.